I'm Eric Olund, a geographer from the University of Sheffield in the UK. I'm going to go over some ideas around the importance of space in normalizing and usualizing neurodiverse people. Space is something that members of any minoritized group are keenly aware of. In neurotypical space, neurodivergent people often feel they don't belong, a square peg in a round hole, or a misfit, as Rosemary Garland Thompson would put it. Finding a space that fits can be a life-changing event. It may be that sensory qualities don't interfere with well-being. If it's a social space, a neurodivergent person's no longer the only one there, and they're able to be themselves with others who get it, and people can organize. The need for neurodivergent space, particularly autistic space, has been widely written about. But more often than not, such space is treated as a container, a discrete space with set characteristics that serves as the external background or context for one's actions. Crucially, someone is the same person, or more precisely the same subject, whether inside or outside that space. In this approach, space doesn't play a direct role in forming one's being, nor does a subject play a direct role in shaping the space. Here, I'm interested in spatially minded academic work on neurodiversity that goes beyond space as container. What I mean by this is work that looks closely at the way spatiality, in its many guises, materially constitutes aspects of neurodiversity and neurodivergence, such as people's sensory, affective, and cognitive experiences of the world, processes of diagnosis and labeling, subjectification and identity construction, and of course, collective action. Some of this work comes from geography, and some comes from other social science and humanities disciplines that also take spatiality as a constitutive aspect of us and our world in their research. So what do I mean by spatiality constituting aspects of our lives like experience, identity formation, social interaction, and so forth? I'll start with a favorite concept of geographers, place, which incorporates the experiential and meaningful aspects of space, and give an example of what I mean. To do so, I'll draw from a paper on South African ADHD or adolescence experiences in school by educational psychologist Niti Mutakrishna. In her paper, she asks, what are the experiential aspects of the geographies of schooling for ADHD children? What processes maintain or challenge the spatial conditions for the construction of ADHD? By geographies of schooling, Mutakrishna is explicitly talking about the experiential and processual aspects of places, such as the school and the home. A little less explicitly, she's also talking about the spatially uneven distribution of schools that either help or hinder ADHD or flourishing. All three of her research participants had been shunted between different types of schools in Durban. Some of these were disabling places for them, and for different reasons. One school spatially segregated the participant from the other students. According to his mother, at the age of 6, a whole day's worth of work, maths, English, whatever it was, he would do in the principal's office. The principal or nobody would come and not check if the child understood the work. Then at the end of the day, the principal would put a line through the work and draw sad faces with tears. This neglect of my child carried on for 2.5 years. Another school had experts in ADHD who, for all intents and purposes, mandated that they take Ritalin, even when it manifestly did not help, and even when it caused severe side effects. This was a place of over-medicalization of students, and of disempowerment for them and their parents. It was also porous, in that while these phenomena happened in the school, their affective and emotional effects leaked out into the home in the evening, as a participant was still experiencing side effects, which made for difficulties interacting with other people, such as family members. But another school, a public school with low fees and few resources, actively refused to medicalize their ADHD students. The participant's teacher said to his mother, "Please don't put him on the medication. We're teachers, we know how to deal with them. All children are active in different ways. We don't have a problem." The point here is not the debate about medicating children per se, and Mutakrishna gives examples of other sorts of enabling places that allow meds. The point is that these different processes for subjectifying students as ADHDers materialize in particular places, and they do so unevenly with vastly different outcomes for both the students and their parents' sense of competence in managing the relationship between ADHD and learning. As Mutakrishna notes in her conclusion, instead of a primary focus on diagnosing and treating the children labeled ADHD, there needs to be a shift to examining their behaviors as symptoms of a wider dysfunction in schooling spaces they have to negotiate. In some ways, the general finding isn't a surprise, but thinking spatially and through place helps to sharpen and give specificity to the material processes of normalization, medicalization, and accommodation that make an ADHDer an ADHDer, and the relational factors that make for very different experiences and emotional lives for those three students gathered under the same diagnostic umbrella. Crucially, it also shows how their own actions and agency help shape the schools in turn as places of inclusion and/or exclusion. Mutakrishna's paper has its limitations, as any paper does. The intersectional factor of class that is clearly influencing this geography of ADHD education is merely implicit here, while the factor of race is missing altogether. This is a common feature of spatially minded work on neurodivergence. Treating space as constitutive, as relational, as processual, as experiential is a complicated business, both empirically and theoretically. With academic articles typically limited to 10,000 words, it's very hard to do justice to multiple modes of social difference and their spatialization at the same time. For example, the geographers Joyce Davidson and Sophie Thomas have looked at gender nonconformity amongst autistics in online and autobiographical material. It's a very good paper and truly intersectional in its analysis, but their main spatial distinctions of online and offline and public and private don't go as much as they might into how these discrete spaces are enabling or disabling or normalizing or liberatory. For future research, then, let me suggest a few possible ways of addressing the constitutive power of space for neurodivergence in its always intersectional manifestations. One, of course, is simply more empirical, qualitative research. For example, asking what is spatially distinctive about the experiences of Asian autistics and white autistics in the home, or of adult employment among dyslexics of different gender identities. While empirical intersectional research is growing, it will be missing a trick if it doesn't attend to the role of space in producing these intersecting identities and the experiences and oppression and creativity. Another route is through more fully utilizing the theoretical resources of the critical traditions informing the neurodiversity approach, whether queer theory, crip theory, black feminism, postcolonial theory, and so forth. For example, black feminists and more recently Afro-pessimists have explored the degendering of blackness materially wrought by the spaces of the Middle Passage, the slave ship, and the plantation. Can racialized forms of neurodivergence and neuronormativity be thought through paradigmatic spaces such as these? Or are there seemingly paradigmatic spaces of neuronormativity or neurodivergence? And if so, what other intersectional modes of differentiation do they play a crucial role in? We already know people need their own spaces, but we also need to understand how space itself helps produce who and what people are to begin with, as well as the ongoing becomings of neurodivergent subjectivity in all its intersectional complexity. Thank you.